Hi everyone, and welcome to Beam Me Out, Language Paper 1, Question 1 and 2. To take part in this, we'd recommend that you have your mental model booklet, as that's what we're going to be using. So if you take out your English Companion or mental model booklet, this will really help you to understand this process. Here's a reminder of our question order. So you start with question 5, 4, 2, 1 and 3. So question 1 is your penultimate question, and we recommend that you spend no longer than 6 minutes on this question. So if we look at your mental model, you'll see that this question is always going to ask you to list 4 things from this part of the text about, and the exam board will decide what topic they want you to focus on. We've got a few tips. So if you look in box A, there's some information about making sure that the things that you find are explicit. So what we mean by that when something's explicit is that it's very obvious and clearly stated. We also recommend that you stay within the correct lines. Any answers that are taken from later on in the text or earlier in the text won't count. So you've got to make a real careful note of what lines they will be. We'd also recommend that you break up your sentences into multiple points if needed, and we'll show you an example of this shortly. And we'd always recommend that you try and add in a 5th point as a safety net. This question is worth 4 marks. It might be seen as quite a short question, but ultimately this is the question that could be the difference between one grade or another. So this paper that we're using is the November 2019 paper. So if you put in AQA Language Paper 1, November 2019, you will find this insert. So the question asks us to read the first part of the source from lines 1 to 5. So what we might do is we might put a little box around that area, maybe in the margin, or we might even just use a certain coloured pen. And then it asks us to list 4 things about Zoe's surroundings from this part of the source. Now you'll notice each row has a different number. So there's plenty of room for you to write as many points as you like. What we wouldn't recommend is just writing out the sentences as they are. You do need to break down the information. So you might say, for example, Zoe's surroundings are, and then you insert either a quote from the text or a paraphrase. So we'd always recommend that you have a look at the box at the top of your insert. This gives you some context. So for example, this source is about a couple who are on a skiing holiday in the French Pyrenean Mountains. You might want to pause the video here and have a quick read of this extract, either in full or from what's available on the screen. So there's lots and lots of different points we can take out of this. And actually this is always how these questions work. There's always going to be more than 4 things that you can say. I'd really recommend choosing 4 quite interesting things. So I might go, for example, for around Zoe was the smell of pine resin. Around Zoe it was snowing. Around Zoe the air prickled with ice. Around Zoe, there were the irregular peaks of a mountain range. We could even go simpler. We could say it's snowing, there is a mountain, there is a smell of pine resin, and they are above the dark outline of the village. We're now going to move on to question 2. So if you remember the sequence from earlier in the video, it goes question 5, question 4, question 2, question 1, and question 3. And we always recommend that question 2 is 12 minutes long. So this is the mental model for question 2. Again, we've got that sentence stem. How does the writer use language to? And it will ask you to think about maybe how something's described, or how someone feels, or how something is represented. If you have a look at box B on your mental model, you'll see that there's some tips. We're going to go through those tips, then we'll look at the approach, and then we'll look at the sentence starters. And a reminder that this question is worth 8 marks. So this is 10% of your overall paper total. So the first thing to remember from the tips box is to focus on the writer's intended effect from the language techniques they use. So you won't necessarily get marks for the techniques you pick out, but it's what you say about their effect that really makes the difference. Higher level responses will connect the ideas across the extract. So they won't just take each technique in isolation, they'll think about how they might connect together. You might want to think about, are there any deeper points about humanity, nature, resilience, or anything else that you might say that goes beyond the obvious meanings of the text? Remember to always link back to effect wherever possible, and always ask yourself, are there any patterns in here? So we're going to move on to our approach. So our approach box asks us to do a certain number of things, and I'm going to demonstrate some of that to you now. So our approach box says we need to read the question and highlight the focus and the command words. We also need to read the extract and find 3 magic quotes with multiple methods to talk about. So this is what it would look like in the exam. So what's really helpful for this question is they put it into a box separate from the insert. So it is always advisable that you read the insert in full so you have an idea of what's happening. But this is really nice because we don't have to have lots of different annotations muddling you. So the question is saying, look in detail at this extract from lines 9 to 14 of the source. How does the writer use language here to describe Zoe's feelings? So we would underline or highlight describe Zoe's feelings because that's what we're focusing on. We've always got these really useful bullet points. So if you're in the exam and you're worried and you want a bit of a prompt, these bullet points are really useful because they remind you of what's expected when you analyse language. So if we go back to the approach box in the left-hand corner of the screen, we've then got to think about, right, if we found our 3 magic quotes, and I've got some there that I've highlighted previously, we need to think about our thesis. What might our thesis be? What's the general idea? Remember, your thesis is a connecting idea. It links the points that you're going to make. So for my thesis, for this example, as I'm starting to plan it, I'm thinking, okay, there is a kind of naivety to what Zoe's doing. There is a sense of beauty, but there is also a sense of danger. So they're the ideas I might have in my head while I'm planning. Remember, you always need to include 2 or 3 pieces of evidence which prove your thesis. You need to analyse your quotes and refer to the writer's choices, and you need to ensure you've referred to methods and analysed the effect of the writer's choices. Remember what we said about box B. It's really, really important that you talk about the effect. So now we're going to look at box D. These are our sentence starters. So our structure is this: thesis, evidence, analysis, choice, evidence, analysis, choice, and then if possible, you do a third evidence, analysis, choice. So what you should have realistically, and I'm hoping this diagram on the right might help you to understand this, your thesis is going to connect the ideas that you talk about. So what we're doing is we're actually getting you to develop your ideas across the text as you go. This will really help you to reach those higher levels. So here's my example. And what I've done with this is I've used my sentence stems from box D, but I've also modified them if I need to. So those sentence stems are very, very basic. And the idea is they are a jumping off point for you. You might need to change the wording. You might want to change them completely. But what we ask is that you really try and follow that teach structure. So here's my thesis. The writer uses language to show how powerful Zoe feels, as if she is in control of the nature around her. So if you'll notice there, I've developed my thesis a little bit. I'm looking at this idea of her feeling powerful. When the writer presents the moment as being as clear and as pure as ice, it shows that she feels happy and content in the moment. This suggests that she is at peace and feels there is nothing in her way. The writer uses the simile, which implies that it is smooth and has nothing impure within it. The choice of the keyword pure builds on this throughout the effect of there being nothing dirty or disgusting to ruin that moment. However, the characteristics of ice mean that it can also cause damage when thrown or hit against something, meaning the writer wants to potentially create an underlying sense of tension to Zoe's experiences. So that's my first thesis and EACH paragraph. I would probably do at least one more paragraph, maybe a third paragraph if I could, but I would have to keep an eye on my timings. What I'd also like to point out to you is how what I'm doing is every time I'm bringing out a technique, I'm developing that understanding. I'm using it to build and to guide my reader so that when the examiner reads this, they get a sense of how well you understand that text. So just a quick reminder of our top tips. So that they're on the left-hand side of the screen. And here's a few extra bonus tips. So try to avoid those empty phrases like, this makes me want to read on. That isn't an effective way of talking about what the writer intends. It's too vague, it's too non-specific. I want you to think about, is the writer trying to create an emotional response within the reader? Are they trying to get them to feel something, think something, or imagine something? Are they trying to create a sense of concern or excitement? So think really carefully, what is the writer trying to do there? So there's another really great point here, and that is your fallback methods. So if you are not sure, is it a metaphor? Is it personification? Is it a simile? You might say it's imagery. Equally, if you're not sure if it's a noun or an adjective or an adverb, just say keywords. Remember what I said at the start of this video. The marks for this question come from the detail you write in and the way that you talk about the effect. So realistically, that's what you need to focus on. I really wish you the best of luck with these two questions. Please remember to speak to your English teacher if you've got any further questions. English teachers are always happy to support students. We really want you to do the best you possibly can. So this is the end of our Language Paper 1 Question 1 and 2 journey. The last thing I have to say to you is good luck. Now, we really want you to do as well as you possibly can, and we really appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos. Good luck, and you're going to smash it. Thank you.